Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Devarim, Tafshin, Pei Beis. So in Parsha's Devarim, and actually in the beginning of the whole book of Devarim, Moshe reviews with the Jewish people some of the major sins that were committed during their 40-year sojourn in the desert. And in this week's Parsha, Moshe goes through the sin of the spies again. Now, this discussion is introduced with the following pasuk, the following verse. This is Perek Aleph, chapter 1, Psukim Chaf Beis, Chaf Gimel, verses 22 and 23. Vatikrivun elai kulchem, you all approached me. Vatamru, and you said, Nishlocha anashim lefanenu, let us send out men before us. V'yachperu lanu et sa'aretz, they shall spy out the land for us. The Yoshivu Aisanu Davar, and they'll bring us back word, as Haderach Hashanalaba, regarding the path in which we will go up on, the Eitzarim Hashanavai Alea, and which cities we shall approach. Vayitav Beinai Davar, this matter was good in my eyes, V'ekach Mikem Shemasar Anashim, and I took from you 12 men, Ish Echad LaShavet, one man from a tribe, per tribe. Now, Rashi comments on the words, Vatikrifun elai kulchem, and you all approached me. The word you all approached me means be'ervuvia, in confusion, in a disorderly manner. Ulahalanu omer, now later on in the book of Devarim, in Devarim Hey, chapter 5, where Moshe repeats the giving of the Torah, there it says, this is after the 10 Commandments, again, Moshe goes to the 10 Commandments, and and you approached me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders. And you said, well, God has shown us that God can speak to man. But they asked that now the process continue through Hashem is speaking only to Moshe, the Moshe is speaking to them. Now there, it doesn't say you all approached me. It says the heads of your tribes and your elders. And what that implies is, that approach was done properly. The younger ones are honoring the elders, and they were sent ahead. And the elders are giving the honor to the heads of the tribes to go before them, as it says, the heads of your tribes and your elders. The heads of the tribes were more distinguished, more important than the elders, and therefore the elder is more than the rest of the people. Let's call them, and therefore the pasuk is implying how there is a proper order, and when they approached, then it was done in a respectful, proper order. The younger ones honor the elders and send them before them. And the elders honor the heads to go before them. But over here, it doesn't say that. It says, you all approached me. That means in confusion, in a disorderly manner. The younger ones pushing aside the elder ones, and the elders pushing aside the heads. They all came, it sounds like they came in a state of panic, or at some level of panic, because they weren't coming in the proper, orderly fashion that they should have. But rather, everybody came in confusion. Okay. So it sounds like, there was a display of lack of derech eretz, a lack of proper etiquette, proper respect. Shabakar Manetsky suggests here that it would seem like Moshe now is coming to, again, repeat and rebuke the Jewish people for the sin of the spies, to learn from it, not to make the same mistake. And that was a lack on the Jewish people's part of their betachon, their trust in Hashem. Hashem told them, the land, I'll give you the land, you'll have no problem. And the spies come back and scare them, and they lost their trust in Hashem. That is, in a nutshell, the sin of the spies. And it would seem that what Moshe is mentioning now is kind of a little side thing, besides for the actual sin of the spies, And the explanation behind it, there was also a lack of derech eretz, a lack of proper etiquette and respect that happened at the beginning. So Yaakov Kamenetsky suggests that's not what's going on here. But rather, Moshe Rabbeinu was pointing out that the main problem that caused the sin of the spies was already present by the request for the spies. Because if the request for the spies would have been done properly, it would have been done in a orderly fashion, not in a panicky fashion, not a confused fashion, that would mean that the Jewish people are not displaying any lack of faith in Hashem. Rather, they're going through the process of the natural means, what we call hishtadlus, the natural involvement and efforts we have to put into whatever we do in life. We don't just rely on miracles. And therefore, if they wouldn't have come in confusion, that would not have that wouldn't have been any kind of lack of trust in Hashem. However, the fact that they came in a state of confusion, that means there was a panic, there was a fear, that already showed that there was a question. They were afraid. That means they were lacking trust in Hashem. And that was displayed through the fact that they came in this confused and panicky manner. So therefore, it's not just another thing, an aside that's taking place in the beginning of this whole story. It's actually the beginning of the problem. At that point, they displayed to a certain degree a lack of trust in Hashem. It doesn't mean that all was lost necessarily, but it meant that what really manifested itself in the actual sin, Moshe Rabbeinu is pointing out, already started when you first approached. Now, after that, Moshe says, "Vayita be'inai hadavar." The manner was good in my eyes. Yaakov Kamenetsky points out, well, if they came in a state of confusion, why was it good? Why was the idea a good idea? And actually, if they already were displaying a lack of trust in Hashem, so, wouldn't it seem therefore that this is not a good idea? If they're requesting it in an inappropriate manner, wouldn't it seem it's not a good idea? Now, actually, Rashi points out on these words, when Moshe says, it was good in my eyes. And that implies, in my eyes, says Rashi, but on the eyes of Hashem. So then why did Moshe send them? So Rashi continues and says, because Moshe Rabbeinu was hoping that by letting them send the spies, that would show that Moshe is not trying to hide anything from them. Yes, no, you want to send spies? Fine, no problem. Meaning they're showing a certain lack of trust. And Moshe Rabbeinu would be showing them, you want to send spies? There's nothing to worry about. And because of that, they would decide, okay, you don't have to bother sending spies. Rashi gives a parable, an analogy to a person who wants to buy a donkey from someone. And the person says, fine, I'll sell it to you. The buyer says, can I take it for a test run? Can I ride it to see how well it goes, how well it operates? The man says, sure. Can I take it in the mountains and the hills? Sure. Can I take it here? Can I take it there? No problem. The buyer says, you know what? I'm not going to bother. If he sees that the seller is so confident and not scared about him taking it for a test drive, that's enough to show that, apparently, if he was afraid, he would tell me not to do it. If he's okay for me to do it, must be that it's okay. Moshe was hoping that would be the same thing by the Jewish people, but it didn't work out that way. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky explains it in another way. Again, working off as a continuation of what he said before, that this coming in a disorderly manner was really a manifestation of a lack of trust in Hashem. And that is that Ramban Nachmanides writes, the principle that Nachmanides writes is that essentially based on how much trust we have in Hashem, that's how much we have to put in our efforts. Essentially, according to Ramban, if a person were to reach a level of trust in Hashem, that he is 100% confident and believing and trusting that Hashem operates and orchestrates everything in the world for us, then you know what? He could just put his trust in Hashem that things will be taken care of. But if we're not there, then already we're not allowed to then say, well, Hashem, I leave it up to you. If you're not fully there in that trust of Hashem, then according to what you're lacking in your trust in Hashem, doesn't mean you don't believe that. Doesn't mean that you're not working on that. But if you're not actually there, You're not fully there in your complete trust in Hashem that he runs the world, because, of course, that's something that we believe and we strive to incorporate and make it real in our lives. But we know there are times where that just doesn't happen. And if that's the way we are, if that's the level of trust in Hashem that we have, then, or that we're lacking, then according to how much we lack, therefore we have to be involved. We have to ishtadlus. We have to put our natural efforts into things. So therefore, what's happening here, says Rabbi Yaakov, is that when the Jewish people asked for their spies, yes, they came and they asked it in a way that displayed a lack of trust in Hashem. That's true. Mean that all was lost. It just meant that now actually that's what would have to happen. Essentially, it's good to my eyes, says Moshe. Hashem didn't want. Hashem really wanted the Jewish people march in, have your trust in Hashem, march in, and you'll take the land. You don't need all the regular things that we do before in preparation for war. But now already, once it comes out that they are lacking in their trust of Hashem, as proven from the way that they approached and requested, now they actually had to send spies. That's what they needed to do. They were obligated to do that now. So again, is what Hashem wanted originally? No. But now that this is where they're at, then Moshe says, I agree to what you asked for, because actually now that's what you need to do. So the point in this Rashi and the approach of Yaakov Kamenetsky suggests here is the idea that the disorderly request was not just a lack of derech eretz, a lack of proper etiquette and respect, but rather it was the first sign of their lack of trust in Hashem. And then because of that, what should have been, what should not have had to have happened, to send spies, because Hashem really didn't want them sending spies. You have your trust in me, you'll be able to go in without that kind of preparation. Nonetheless, once they displayed the lack of trust in Hashem, now already they had to send spies, because now they were obligated to put in their efforts. Because according to how much trust we have or lack of it, that determines whether we have to put our hishtadlus, our natural efforts into it or not. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is how later on in the Parsha, where Moshe talks about how when the Jewish people were traveling through the desert, they passed by the country of Edom. Edom were descendants of Esav. And Hashem tells them, you cannot take that that's given to Esav, and that stays by him. And then they were traveling by the land of Moab and Ammon, other nations that were in the area. And there too Hashem tells them that you cannot wage any war against them. You cannot take their land. Why? Because their land, Moab, Ammon and Moab, were descendants of Lot, the nephew of Abraham. And those lands were promised to the descendants of Lot, so you can't take them. Now, on the other hand, Rashi points out that when traveling by the country of Moab, Hashem says to Moshe, tell the Jewish people, let me get there. Moshe says, Al tatzares Moab, do not distress Moab, Al tiskar ba melchama, and do not provoke war with them. When they're passing Ammon, Hashem tells Moshe to tell the people the same thing. It's a little bit of a different wording. The karaftem b'nei Ammon, you will be approaching the children, the nation of Ammon. Al titzurei v'al tiskarbam, do not distress them, do not provoke them. It doesn't say don't provoke war against them, which Rashi points out means like this. When it comes to Moab, to the Moabites, you cannot provoke them with war, but you can provoke them. You can provoke them. You can scare them. You can appear like you want to attack them. Why they want to do? They did that. Why did they? That's a different discussion. But they were permitted to do that. You can't wage war, meaning you can't take their country away from them. You can't conquer their land. However, you want to scare them, you can do that. That's what it means, al tiskaba melchama, do not provoke them with war. By Ammon, it says, al tiskaba, no provoking at all. Not only can't you wage war and take their land, you also cannot even scare them. What was the difference? Why were the Moabites treated worse than the Ammonites? So for that, we have to go back to the fact we mentioned that Ammon and Moab are descendants of Lot. And they were actually the descendants of Lot's children who he had with his daughters. We have the story of how Lot, the city of Stone, was destroyed. Sodom and Amorah and the environs were destroyed. Lot remained hiding in a cave with his daughters. They thought there was no one left in the world to populate the world, and therefore they landed up cohabiting with their father, and each one was impregnated by their father. The oldest daughter called her son Ben Ami, the son of my nation. She was implying that this child had a connection to the father. Ben Ami, the son of my nation. The younger daughter called him Moav, which means from the father. The younger daughter was less discreet. And therefore, because the younger daughter was less discreet, therefore her children were protected from war, but not from being antagonized, but not from being scared about war. While the oldest one, because she was more discreet about what happened, therefore her children, no antagonizing, no scaring them in a warlike manner at all. So we have a distinction between Ammon and Moab as to can you scare them with, can you threaten them with war? Can you scare them with the threat of war? And we say you can't do it to Ammon because their mother was more discreet. And you can do it to Moab because their mother was less discreet. But let's try to go back a step. And that is the whole idea that these lands are given to Lot and can't be taken away from descendants. What's that about? And that, our sages teach us, is about the following. If we again go back to Bereshis, we're introduced to Lot as Avraham's nephew. When Hashem tells Avraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha, leave your land to go to the land of Canaan, he takes Lot with him. Lot doesn't have a father. Takes Lot with him. When they all have to go down to Egypt because of a famine in the land of Canaan, so Avram knows that the problem in Egypt is that if somebody comes to Egypt with a beautiful wife, and Pharaoh and Paro wants her, you're dead, and Paro takes your wife. And therefore, he said about Sarah that Sarah is my sister. Lot knew that Sarah was not his sister. So our sages say that because Lot did not inform on Avram, therefore he was rewarded, that his descendants, that land would be promised his descendants and can never be taken away from them. Now, it seems maybe even a bit strange that, Lot would have been suspect of informing on his uncle. And to make it short, to give a short explanation, looking at who Lot was, Lot clearly had a weakness for money. Because we know that later on, eventually, when they come back to the land of Canaan, Lot has his shepherds and sheep, and Avram has his shepherds and sheep, and Lot allows his shepherds to allow the animal to pasture in land that doesn't belong to them. When Avram says to Lot, we have to separate, Lot decides to go to the city of Sodom, as evil as it was, because it was a very fertile area. Again, it was about his material possessions. So Lot clearly had a weakness towards money. If he would have informed Avram that Avram was lying about Sarah, then he probably could have fetched a nice amount of money for his information. But he didn't do it. So there was a challenge to Lot in this. There was a challenge to him. And he still didn't give in his uncle. That was considered a meritorious act for him, and therefore he got that reward for that his descendants would get land, they're going to be taken away from them. Okay, so that therefore explains to us why there is this whole idea that the lands of the descendants of Lot, Ammon and Moab, no war, you can't take away that land. But the idea of it scaring them, antagonizing them in a warlike manner, that doesn't seem to have been guaranteed through what Lot did. That only comes about because the older one is more discreet than the younger one. So she was able now to, her merit was now, she gave her descendants, they're not even going to be scared of war. So Lot's action is enough for him to get the land, for his descendants to get the land, but they can really be scared with warfare. What was lacking in Lot's act that he only merited so far? So Naftali Reich of Monsey, New York, brings the following answer. And he cites commentaries that explain that although Lot clearly was rewarded for the fact that he did not inform upon his uncle, but what he didn't do was give his uncle the peace of mind to know that he wouldn't do it. He didn't inform on his uncle, but he also never told his uncle, don't worry about it. And he should have done that. Clearly, Lot had the ability to do it. Clearly, there was a challenge for Lot. And if Lot really cared about his uncle, he would have told him, don't worry, I'm not going to inform on you. He should have reassured him. But he didn't reassure him, which means Avram the whole time is really nervous. Maybe at some point he's going to be informed. He's going to get informed on. So the fact that he didn't inform is meritorious enough that he gets this reward. But if he didn't reassure and give his uncle the peace of mind, then he couldn't merit then his descendants wouldn't merit peace of mind, the peace of not being scared of war. Because since Lot didn't reassure his uncle, give his uncle the peace of mind of what he was concerned about, he couldn't merit that his descendants would have the peace of mind, that they wouldn't be antagonized, that they wouldn't be scared. At the end, since the older daughter was more discreet, therefore she merited that her descendants would not be antagonized at all. So what we see from here is the fact that you can do a meritorious act. You can do a kindness, you can do a chesed for a person. But it also depends on how you do it, because how you do it will make a difference to the recipient. So Rabbi Reich gives the following story to illustrate this idea. There was once a very poor man. He had nothing. He was destitute. He was sitting on a park bench, wondering when's the next time he's going to have a meal. And he sees a wealthy man approaching him. And the wealthy man is smiling at him. This looks good. Maybe there's hope. Maybe he's going to help me. And as the wealthy man is approaching him and wants to say something to him, his phone rings. And he gets on the phone and he starts talking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. After that, he finishes his phone call. He goes over to the needy man and he says to him, come home with me. Come have dinner with me. And he brings the poor man home, gives him a beautiful meal with tremendous respect. And before the poor man leaves, so his host says to him, tell me, did I treat you well? And the poor man says, sure, it was wonderful. The host says, any criticism? Was I lacking anywhere? So the poor man gets a little fidgety and he says, well, if you really want to know, yeah, I do want to know, says the host. So the needy man says, it would have been a lot better if you would have invited me before you got onto the phone, before you started that conversation, or at least interrupt the conversation at one point and not have to make me wait for the invitation. Because as long as you were on that phone, I wasn't sure if at the end of the day, my situation is going to change. I wasn't sure that maybe you're just going to turn around and leave, and I won't eat for another cut, and I won't eat for who knows when. In this story, of course, at the end, he did a wonderful kindness, but he could have done it better if instead of making this person wait and getting him nervous, if he would have right away told them, come. Maybe they would have to wait because he had to take the phone call. But at least he knew that he had something in the bank. At least he knew he had a meal coming. And the is that we have to try to make sure that even when we do for someone something, that it's not just the main act, the gift, whatever it is that we're giving. It's how we do it makes a difference also. Because how we do it is going to make a difference on how the person feels. For example, you give tzedakah to a needy person. A needy person comes and asks you for money, and you give him. And you give him a nice amount of money. Give him a $20 bill. But how'd you give it to him? Did you look him in the face and give it to him with a smile? You just pull it out and hand it to him and not even look at him. Fine, $20 is good. But, how did he feel when he received it? It's not just what we do, it's how we do it. How we do it can make a tremendous difference. Another person who's receiving our help will feel secure and comfortable. Have a wonderful evening.